sir. How you doing?
Pretty good.
Where were you born?
Jamaica, New York, borough of Queens, New York City.
When was this?
1952.
How was your family like?
It was an average family, a good family. My father passed away when I was 13. We went several years. My mother was a single mom, and then she remarried.
What was you doing before entering the service?
I was a student. No, like I said, I got busted with a small amount of pot and was tossed up between going to jail or joining the Army or the military, so I chose the military.
Did you have any other family members that served the military?
Yes, my daughter served in the first Gulf War. She was on the what's the name of that carrier? Anyway, they were the first ones to send planes in. And then if you take that back from there, they were the first ones to send planes into Kuwait against Saddam Hussein. If you take that back, we go back all the way back to the War of 1812. I haven't been able to find anybody yet in the Revolution, although I did have family here. I don't know which side they would have fought on anyways.
How did you enter the military? Was it through a draft or enlistment?
No, more or less court order. I could say it was my choice. It was a toss-up between that or going to jail. Army sounded better than jail.
Yeah. I understand that you chose the Army as a branch. What made you choose that?
Everyone but my daughter has served in the Army at one time or another. Well, the male members of my family. And my daughter was the only one that was in the Navy. She went into the Navy.
How were your early days of training?
Well, the first thing they do is the first week they break you down and strip away all your humanity, everything that you think you are. And they break you down and then proceed to rebuild you. So it's a hard thing. The first week or 2 weeks is very difficult because it's stripping away everything that you think you are.
How is it adapting to the military life?
After a while, it's not that hard, oddly enough. Even though I've always been one to question authority, it's not as difficult to fall into that role that they've held. You know, you're there with everybody else. One of the biggest things in the military is that you're not by yourself. I think the stupidest thing they ever came up with was an army of one. That's insanity, because we're a group. Didn't make any difference what color you were, what accent you had, where you came from. You were a group. You were green at that time, and your life depended on the people that you were with. So it's very easy to fall into that because you know that your life depended on them and their life depended on you. And we always made sure we had each other's back. So it's very easy to fall into that. And you make friends with people that you never thought you'd never dream of. You know, you make solid, firm friendships that last a lifetime, memories that last a lifetime.
Where did you serve?
All over the world. My combat tours were in Vietnam, 1969, 1970, 1971 to 72. I did 2 tours, one in the infantry and the other as a medic. My first tour was in the infantry. When I first went in, I had no choice. They just were going to put me wherever they wanted to. My second time around, I knew what I could do then. Then I learned the ins and outs of Army life and how rules and regulations work. And that's how I wound up going into becoming a medic down at Fort Sam Houston.
How was the trips?
They were all good, but when you first take off, you're a little on the apprehensive side because you don't know what you're in for. Like if you're taking a training trip to a training mission to Alaska, you know it's going to be cold. It's not that bad. But when you're actually going into a firefight, when you're going into a live fire zone, that's an entirely different experience because you don't know what's coming, and the level of apprehension gets pretty high. And like the old John Wayne movies, it's nothing like that at all. I would describe military life, generally speaking, as 23 hours and 45 minutes of unbelievable boredom and 15 minutes of screaming terror. Absolute nightmarish terror.
What were some actions you witnessed?
This could go on for a long time. One of the very first things that I was placed on when I got in country after acclimatization and getting acquainted with the area and what was going on and this, that, and the other thing, one of the first things I was put out on was a listening post. And, you know, listening post is what it says. You're in a hole, you're listening for things. She's creeping up on you. And I heard a thud. And I stuck my head up out of the hole to find out what it was, and that's when a grenade went off. That was my first Purple Heart. Almost lost my eye, got carved up here. A couple of shots on my cheek. I was deaf for 3 days, blind for 2. It was yeah, I don't believe, you know, they gave me a Purple Heart for being an idiot. I was stupid, but I learned from it. I learned very quickly.
Yeah. Relating to combat, what were like some of your emotions towards it?
It's whenever I do something like this, I have to explain something. And I don't know if others can do it better than I can, but there are some words that just don't exist. And those of us who have been through combat know this. We can look at each other and we know what we're feeling. Because there's no ways to really explain some of this. So the best I can do with that is to remind people that it is a nightmarish scenario that if you took everything horrible you could possibly imagine and cram it into 10 minutes of a firefight, it is by far the absolute worst. You multiply that by 10. I mean, you have no idea. It's very difficult to explain what it's like being shot at or being in hand-to-hand combat. And your emotions just go raw, and the only thing you can think of is killing. Because that's what you've been trained to do. So your emotions just take a completely different road than they normally would.
Do you have any memorable moments in the military?
A million of them. It depends. You want to go combat or non-combat? You know, I mean, I could. There was a guy from, I can't remember his name. I think his name was Bidey. He was a really big guy. He was a really huge guy. They used to bring out chow in mermite cans, and which are these pre-warmed cans, and they help to keep your food warm, which really doesn't work. But they would put about 6 slices of bread at the bottom of this thing. And then they'd put about 8 pounds of bacon on top of that. So, and this was to feed like an entire platoon. And so you go through and this, that, and the other, and you get there and the bacon was dry, and if you like, I wouldn't call it crispy, it'd be more like something like off a roof or something like that, like a roof tile or something. Terrible. Well, after all the bacon was gone, there's all this bread there that has been sitting at the bottom, soaking up all of this grease. And this guy comes over and he goes, "Hey, Sarge, you gonna eat that?" I'm looking there, and there's nothing there but a couple of crumbs and this bread. And I said, "Hell no." He just scooped all 6 pieces in his hand, scrunched them. The grease was just running down his thing, and he just started eating this. And I was like, oh my God! I couldn't eat bacon for like a year after that. It was just one of the most repulsive things I ever saw in my life. And he was just humming away and just chowing down like it was nothing. But I guess in the South, or wherever he was from, that was perfectly normal. You know, to me it was like, oh, how could you possibly? You know, I could almost hear his arteries going. You know, oh. But he was a fun guy. He was a really good guy.
Did you form any friendships during the time?
Hundreds of them. Hundreds of them. Everybody I met. Everybody I met I considered my brother in arms. And with that automatically came a friendship. You know, there were times of disagreements, of course. But irregardless of whether there was a time of disagreements, like I said before, you have to cover each other. So you automatically become friends, automatically. And sadly, a lot of them are gone now. So, 2 of them froze to death. They were homeless. 2 of them, a year apart, almost to the day, froze to death, and both behind dumpsters. And I was really sad when I heard about that. I wouldn't have done anything for them. You know, but I didn't know.
How have you stayed in touch with some of your family and friends during your time of service?
To be honest with you, I tried very hard. I stayed in touch with my brother while I was in the Army, my older brother, because he had already been in. As far as my family went, sending home stuff for my mom and my stepdad, excuse me, it was very general. You know, hi, nothing like hi, having a wonderful time, wish you were here. You know, but it was like, oh, I'm okay, they got me in the rear, don't worry about me, this, that, and the other thing. And to be honest with you, they were all complete and total lies because I wasn't in the rear, I was the front line. My specialty was were ambushes, and when I was in the infantry, that was my specialty. And I was nearly constantly on the front line. Went into Laos, went into Cambodia, killed a lot of people.
During your time of service, did you do anything like recreational?
Oddly enough, no. I read a lot. I read a lot. I've always been a big one for reading, and so I did a lot of reading. But as far as going off on R&R or anything like that, some of the guys went to Okinawa, a few others went to Japan, a few others went here, there, and the other place. I always had the impression that if this is purely selfish, but if I wasn't there, something would go wrong, and then I would blame myself. So I was always one of those that was in the forefront of everything that happened, because that way I could help prevent something from spiraling down into a nightmare.
What types of things did you read?
Mostly science books. You know, this thing about science. It's a lot of, well, science back then was a little bit different than it is now. I mean, things have expanded exponentially to where people are, you know, we're talking about string theory. You know, back when I was in, string theory would have consisted of I have a string, you know, that's it. You know. So, you know, but I enjoyed science and a lot of history. A lot of history, too. I always enjoyed trying to figure out how we became what we are.
Did it help you get through your times?
Yeah. Yeah. Quite often. You get to escape. You know, it's kind of nice when you can escape and you don't have to physically get up and walk away and move, but you can escape mentally. You can look at new and different things. That's what's nice about science. That's what's nice about history. You can look at things from different angles. and it gives you a chance mentally to escape. You know, physically you're still there, but at least your mind gets to go different places.
How important was that to you?
Extremely. Extremely. Everything, from my point of view, everything is tied together. And science and history and even ancient literature and stuff like that, some of the old classics like Plato and Socrates and things like that, they all go together and everything melds together. And if you can look at it from, what's the easiest way to put this? A lot of people in this world look at things as black or white or a slightly different shade of gray. I look at life like a prism or a diamond in the sunlight. As you hold it up, there's a million different colors hit the walls. Each time you turn it, it shifts just a little bit more. So life is like that. It shifts, it changes, it's vibrant. And I like to look at life like that. Instead of somebody who just says, yeah, it's this, yeah, and the other guy saying, no, it's this. You know, as far as I'm concerned, there's a couple of people I don't want to hang out with. They're idiots. You know, look at the full function of life. Look at all the aspects, all the things that we can think of, and all the ways that we can do things so much better. And then you turn the diamond just a little bit more, and everything changes. Now we have to find more new, better ways to get things going. But they're always vibrant and full of color and life. You know, it's nice.
Where were you when the war ended?
I was, let me see, it was 1975. I was back in New York. I was working for, I forget what you call it. It's sort of like, these guys made like arcade games and stuff like that. I was working for them. It wasn't a bad job. I mean, didn't pay anything. There was no future in it whatsoever. So I, you know, said I had to hell with this. I lasted about 3 months. I went back in the Army and finished up. I did 13 years, a little over 13 years old.
When it first ended, like what year was that?
1975. That's when Nixon had promised to get us out of the war. He never did. As a matter of fact, I remember very specifically, I was about 20 clicks inside of Laos and hearing Nixon on the radio saying that we weren't in Laos or Cambodia, we weren't expanding the war. And I was like, well, if I'm not in Laos, here I am. You know, give me the phone. I'll call this guy, tell him exactly where I am. And he sent me here. You know, or through his orders, I eventually got there. So the entire war scenario was built on, like all war scenarios, built on lies and mistruths and half-truths given to the people so that they can digest it easily. You know, one of the, if you read history books, you know, I'd say about 75% of them, of what's in a history book, has something to do with war or conflict of some type. You know, and I always found that a bit on the absurd side because people from every continent, every place, every village, every town, every city, there have been people throughout history that have done fantastic and marvelous things, but they never get mentioned. Some idiot general gets mentioned because he led this great battle and 20,000 people got killed. That's 20,000 lives that were lost. You know, which is better, the guy who invented the wheel, which I think is pretty cool, or the guy who invented the sword and then proceeded to make a bazillion of them and then go around killing everybody? I'll go with the guy with the wheel.
After the war ended, how did you return home?
Well, I came back, I was still in, so at that point, when my part of the war ended, I came home and I was treated fairly, and basically for a short period of time, basically as if I had never left. I was just there. I was just, you know, so like, hey Rob, how you doing? Hey, I haven't seen you in a long time. Where you been? Been in Nam. Oh, shit. Yeah, that's it. You know, and then we went back to drinking beer, you know. We rarely, a few of us, would get together. I did what I thought I was supposed to do. Join the BFW, join the American Legion, and all this, that, and the other thing. And the only thing I found out about that was the more you drink, the tougher guys thought they were. You know, everybody thought they deserved a Medal of Honor by the time the happy hour was over. It's like ludicrous.
More on you, like, coming home. How did your family and friends receive that?
They were happy. I mean, my family especially, you know, my mother was, you know. Me, I was sort of like, well, yeah, okay, that's just the way things go, you know. There is a very painful memory there. The only, as near as I can figure, I've only fallen in love twice. Once way back when in '68, and once again just recently. But the first one, that's very painful. I lost her. When I came home, I'd changed, and I would be sleeping next to her. Woke up in freezing cold sweat, shot bolt upright, strangling my pillow. And after about 2 weeks, I got to the point where I was afraid. I was actually terrified that I would hurt her. So I broke it off. It was probably the worst mistake I ever made in my entire life. But I was just absolutely terrified that I would hurt her. Because I was, there were a lot of naked, raw emotions at that point that were, and none of them were particularly good.
Yeah, must have been tough. How was it readjusting to civilization?
Just as now, well, I think it's a little bit better now, but not by much. It's the same old story. They use you up, and then they toss you on a trash heap. They just forget about you. Lincoln had a perfect example of taking care of those that had served, the widows, the orphans, and this, you know, I mean, he had this beautiful view of taking care of soldiers, not just from the Union Army, but the Confederate Army as well, because he still considered the Confederates Americans. You know, so the idea was to bring the whole country back together and do this by helping those who had fought this unbelievably horrific war. But ever since then, it's been the same old story throughout history. It's use up your soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, use them up, and then toss them out in the trash. We don't need them anymore. You know, and I think that is a tragedy, because we ask a small portion of the people of our nation to stand up and protect us, but when we don't need them anymore, we just throw them away. Except for in World War II, they had the GI Bill, which, thank God, gave us this unbelievable chance at moving forward, and we actually regressed because we wound up getting into more wars and stuff like that. But we had this unbelievable chance, a beautiful, wonderful chance to educate people who never would have gotten an education, to try and get people closer and closer together. It was the springboard for civil rights. It was the springboard for women's rights. It was the springboard for all kinds of, getting rid of all kinds of social ills, although it took a tremendous amount of time. And we're still fighting some of those fights. You know, like as far as like equal pay for women and this, that, and the other. But if we all took like Lincoln's vision, that we're all human beings every last one of us is a human being, and we should all be treated as such, then, you know, if we actually did that, we'd be doing an astonishing thing, not just for the people who are coming home now, but also for the people who have served and those who supported them in their service over the years too. I'm not talking about chicken hawk maniacs that are beating the drums of war all the time, and you know, they always want to go out and kill somebody, you know. But they're the first ones to run away. You know, they send me to go and kill somebody, but you know, it's beneath them to join. You know, I find that a little disturbing.
Do you keep in contact with any of the veterans that you had experiences with as like?
I do on email with about a dozen that I was pretty close to. Working with Veterans for Peace, I never knew any of these individuals in the combat zone, but we have an invisible bond between us that we all served at different various capacities and this, that, and the other thing. And so I get it's an immediate bond. I mean, it's hard to explain. But the ones that I was actually with about, you know, dozen, maybe 2 dozen occasionally, I deal with an email. Or I'll find out that, like Joey Higgins froze to death behind a dumpster. And I'm thinking to myself, how the hell could that happen? You know, another friend of mine down in Arizona, for whatever reason, I was living in Arizona at the time. If I only would have known he was facing the problems he went and put a bullet through his head. You know, and it's just sort of like, what happened that brought him to that point? And, you know, I wish I could have been there to try and intervene. Same thing now with what's happening now. People being, although I will hand the VA 100% rating on this. They're really working very hard on suicide prevention, bringing people back into society. Military sexual trauma is another big thing they have. They're working very hard with PTSD. So the VA under Shinseki has done marvelous steps forward in helping people. I'm impressed with them for that.
Have you been in any veteran-related organization?
VA, hold on. VFW, American Legion, AMVETS. I've been associated at various times with all of those. They're a little too hawkish for me. You know, some 90-year-old buzzard shouldn't be standing around talking about how we should be going to war. He's already done his time. He's not sending other people. Or now he's in a position where he's manning out of his government. And those things are notoriously inaccurate, so you can't hit a barn door at 5 feet with that damn thing. But if it does get you, it's going to clip you pretty good. So I just pulled out my .45 and I shot him. And I caught him in the chest, finished up with my guy. I said, I'll be back in a minute. He goes, Doc, where are you going? I said, I got to go patch him up. He goes, what? You just shot the son of a bitch. I said, yeah, but that's the law. That's the law of land warfare. That's the moral equivalent. That's what you have to do. I went over and I patched that guy up and called in a dust-off, which is, I guess, in civilian parlance, medevac. And they both flew out on the same dust-off. And I wonder to this day if that guy didn't shove that NVA lieutenant out the door. He was really ticked off that he was wounded and this guy was still coming after us, shooting. But hopefully he didn't, because that would have been that would have been murder. And that NVA lieutenant wasn't about to do anything. You get hit with a .45, you go down. There's no way out of it.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me conduct this interview with you. And I would like to thank you for the time that you served.
Well, thank you for having me, and stick with your studies. Have you picked a major yet?
No, not yet.
Take your time.
All right.
You'll feel it when you go into it. You'll feel it. And enjoy life. Try and stay out of the military. But it's been a pleasure.